Everyone's talking about R. Kelly after new sex abuse allegations surfaced in a controversial docuseries. But what does it really mean for the R&B superstar and his alleged victims?
When a woman loves.
R&B superstar R. Kelly has a long list of hit songs spanning more than 2 decades and a lengthy list of allegations, including sex with underage girls and sexual assault. The stories told in the docuseries Surviving R. Kelly cause many to wonder why he's not in jail.
Right now, there's no criminal charges. The docuseries was not a criminal case. It's people's version of events, but that's not evidence.
Alleged victims have been taking Kelly to civil court seeking monetary damages for years. In 2018, Faith Rogers accused R. Kelly in a civil suit of sexual battery, false imprisonment, and deliberately infecting her with an STD when she was 19. Now she claims R. Kelly is retaliating.
Taking a stand against R. Kelly, someone who's been termed the king of R&B, and is loved by many, has not been easy.
Some parents of alleged victims are speaking out as well, often years later. Dr. Elisa English believes more should have been done to protect the young girls.
Just the role of the family and the support system. I feel like there wasn't enough of that. You're talking about young kids. Someone should have been caring for them. And if that was not the case, where was child protection?
R. Kelly strongly denies all claims relating to sexual assault, domestic violence and abuse, and sexual misconduct with minors. But the many alleged victims disagree. There was the celebrity factor, enablers, fans, and the public who must share responsibility, says Joel Payne.
We decided to not confront the truth as it was presented to us 15, 20 years ago. So I think we all have a role to play.
The fact is, R. Kelly has never been convicted in a criminal case. The closest call was his arrest on multiple child pornography charges for the notorious video with an underage girl. But a jury found him not guilty.
I think he has probably a few more civil suits to deal with, and basically people suing him for money. I think there's a reasonable shot that he could get charged with a crime. It's just that, based on what I've heard so far, it's probably not going to be based on that. It'd have to be something else in addition to what we know.
There are many more layers to this. Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining me is criminal defense attorney Jason Foy. He's a partner in the firm Foy and Sepulwitz. He's also a former prosecutor. Jason, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Dr. Elisa English. She's a clinical therapist. Dr. Elisa, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us is Joel Payne. He's a social commentator, media contributor, and columnist. Joel, great to have you on the show.
Good to be with you.
Thank you so much. Jason, I want to start with you on the legal side, because one of the questions we have been getting, our whole Street Soldiers team, all of our social media, on the streets, everywhere I go, people are like, why isn't he in jail? What do you say to that?
Well, I believe he's not in jail because, at least to date, other than the trial he had, I guess it was back in 2008, based on allegations from 2002, they haven't found sufficient, reliable, credible evidence to support a charge. You need to be charged with something before we can start talking about jail. There's a process to that, but we haven't even gotten to the beginning because he hasn't been charged with a crime.
So these people that think you go on TV, you make some statements, and then boom, there's some kind of criminal case. Are we not understanding the legal system here?
Well, I can tell you that the docuseries is not evidence. It's not something that a prosecutor or the police would use solely to support a case. Now, it could be something that could start an investigation, which I guess is what's happening now. They're starting to look into some things. But the show that was shown, that's not evidence.
Right, and it wasn't news either. It was, I mean, not
Right,
based
it was
on news
recounting
standards.
old stories, quite frankly, from years ago, some more recent, but a lot of it was from a long time ago.
All right.
So there's issues with statutes and limitations and different things.
All right, we're going to get into that too in just a little bit. Dr. Lisa, when you look at R. Kelly, first of all, look at R. Kelly. What strikes you about him from your clinical perspective?
R. Kelly is simply someone, I would say I don't want to say he's a narcissist, but I think he's someone that clearly doesn't understand the behavior because there hasn't really been any consequences. And we we change behavior based on consequences. So there has been none. The people who were around him, they validated him. The legal system, in many ways, validated him. So what is wrong? Why is everyone concerned about what it is that I'm doing? In fact, everyone seems to be with
Okay
it.
with it.
Okay with it. And he's in a culture where it goes on all the time.
Right, and people have heard of it before.
Yeah.
Joel, when you look at the way this whole thing has played out, the timing of it, they kind of dropped the docuseries when, right after the holidays, before the whole new year really gets into full gear with new shows and people's lives and activities. What's your take on this?
Oh, listen, it was purposely designed to have an impact, and I think it's having a desired impact. And I think it's overdue. It's very, you look at kind of what happened with Bill Cosby, and very similar to the Hannibal Buress, comedy skit that kind of led to a reawakening about that. I think the fact that we're in the Me Too moment now, I think certainly the folks who are behind the Mute R. Kelly movement and some of these other different infrastructures that have been put together see an opportunity to really reevaluate what's going on. But here's what I come back to. It takes a village, okay? So we've talked about all these different disparate entities. We've talked about the legal system. We've talked about his handlers and his agents and his lawyers and the media. Everyone is, in my mind, a co-conspirator here, because we've been watching R. Kelly publicly talk about this behavior and brag about this behavior for 2 decades. And we've actually not just allowed him to do it, but we've kind of encouraged him to do it. So really, in a way, to Dr. Elisa's point, we validated his behavior. And I think there's a lot of examination that's got to go on across the board, not just within R. Kelly, but within all these different entities we're talking about.
And
It's like,
how do
what's
we
in-
value children, particularly children of color? So that, to me, is a conversation that should be had across the board.
But I think that's also one of the issues with this too, is because I think the underage, and just from what, again, what I'm getting from feedback, since I've been covering this story for Fox 5 News as well, the underage piece, where there were, where he was allegedly having sexual relations with underage girls, there's I would say 99.9% universal condemnation of that. That's not okay with anybody. But then when you get to young women that are 19, 20, 21, in their 20s, that becomes a whole different story.
Or 35.
Or 35.
Right, because there were older women that were affected by the situation, according to the docuseries. So,
What do you think about in terms of the law, the underage piece?
well, that's probably the most serious aspect of his allegations, meaning having sexual relationships with minors. It's a very complex, difficult thing, but it's difficult to prosecute those cases. So it's not just difficult to defend against the allegation, it's difficult to prove. So you have to have good, solid evidence, which is difficult because victims don't want to come forward. And that affects their ability to prove these cases.
But do they have a right to consent to sex with an older person?
Well, the answer is no. A 13-year-old can't consent to having sex with a 30-year-old. That's not.
But what about a 17-year-old?
They're legally not capable about it. Joel, what do you think about
mean-
the underage thing?
Well, I think the most heartbreaking part about the underage piece is that these are, it would be heartbreaking even if it were a stranger.
Right.
The fact that these are people who are close to him. This is the child, allegedly, of one of his bandmates.
Right.
Right? That Sparkle talked in great detail about during the docuseries. And the fact that it's well known. There were people, Jason, we were talking earlier about in the trial how there was not sufficient evidence. You had people from the community who said, I coached this girl in soccer. I went to school with this young lady. She was known as the person who was in the video. And yet and still, we decided not to believe what happened. We didn't want to believe R. Kelly could have done these things. And by the way, it's another challenge that we're going to have with Michael Jackson very soon, because I'm telling you, that same reexamination that we went with Bill Cosby, that we're going through now with R. Kelly, it's coming to Michael Jackson very soon.
This is Street Soldiers. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. We'll be right back.
We are not required to follow what legal precedent tells us. In other words, we don't have to buy R. Kelly songs.
Joel, one of the things we kept hearing from people is they saw the women talking about their stories, and some people were saying this was very upsetting. They were very moved by it, but then there were other people saying they just didn't believe it.
Well, look, this is the culture that we're within, right? Where celebrities, their word is God. And by the way, it's how he got away with this for, 2+ decades. But again, let's talk also about the young women who were impacted here. They were majority African-American women, and I think we have to do a real evaluation, particularly within our African-American community, about the value of the word of black women. do we believe black women the same way we believe white women, the same way we believe others in our society? I think that's really something that this is going to tease out, whether or not we've really determined we're going to treat the word of black women with the same gold standard that we treat others.
Dr. Lisa, what about that?
I mean, but the women also have families. And so what role did they play in terms of moving this issue forward? Did they put pressure on the legal system in order to ensure prosecution? I mean, you do have many black women who have advocated. There was a black woman who founded the Me Too movement.
Right.
So, I mean, that being said, I don't want to minimize. I do agree with you. I think developmentally, black young girls are seen as adults because they sort of develop. To me, more not to me, but they develop
The over sexualization image,
not only just
stereotypes.
physically, they
Stereotypes I'm
are
talking about.
overdeveloped,
Right.
and so in many ways, people see them and view them as older than they really are. And so, yeah, and overall, I think black women, aren't
But
really
this has been
valued
in
in
our
society.
face. But this has been in our face for a long time.
Yes.
The situation with Aaliyah was 1996.
Wow.
These women have been coming out with these stories. Again, a slow drip over 2 decades. I mean, you're talking 2000, 2003, 2008, as recent as 2015.
But let's not take away the fact that in society, black women are protectors of black men. So because the system in many ways,
Like, why do you
seems
want to take him down? There's
right.
that
The
that
system
you
is
hear
always
too.
there to take them down.
Jason,
And so
what about
that's, another part of our culture.
That concept of it.
I don't deny that there are some unique issues that women in general and black women in particular have with being believed and credibility. And when it relates to cases like this, when it's sex or underage sex or without consent, it can be difficult. When we get into a courtroom, yes, I can't deny that racial components don't come into play. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's very nuanced. But it's really the credibility, the challenges behind the story. If X is true, what else is true? If the witness says one particular thing, what does that mean based on the physical evidence, whether it's a video or what somebody said or a text message? So it's difficult. I'm not saying that race doesn't come into play, but as far as the legal system and trying a case, proving a case, or defending a case, really you have to take the witnesses as they come. If it's a black woman, then well, let's hear what she has to say. Does it line up? Does it make sense? How does she handle herself when challenged on her word? That's part of that process.
Well, there's 2 parts to this stuff.
Okay.
There's a legal piece. It's kind of like you
Okay.
think about like the NFL. There's a legal piece and then there's a societal piece.
Okay.
Society, we are not required to follow what legal precedent tells us. In other words, we don't have to buy R. Kelly songs. We don't have to support the Chocolate Factory, okay?
Right.
We have a choice of whether or not to support that based on whether we agree with the moral or amoral behavior of Robert Kelly.
Dr. Lisa, let's talk about the women here. And let's keep it 100, let's keep it 1,000. There's a lot of women that are empowered by what's going on. They feel that they don't have to be ashamed anymore if something happened to them. But there's also part of our culture, women that are previously were called groupies, now they're, called whatever. They want to be around powerful, rich men to try to get paid, to try to be their girlfriend, to try to get their career going or whatever, and they're willing to put up with behavior that otherwise would not be acceptable. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, women that do that, we can't really put them in the same category as the women who are involved in the R. Kelly situation, particularly those that are underage. Those who are now of legal age, perhaps there's some conversations that can be had about that, whether or not they...
And not to blame the victim. I
No,
want to be very
right.
clear.
So,
I'm
right.
talking about personal responsibility.
Right. So at some point there is personal responsibility, and maybe we live in a society where, people glorify celebrities and they want to be around them for whatever reason, whether it's to connect them to some kind of, resource or job or, some kind of thing that they can do that makes them successful in that business, or it's just because they want to feel connected or close to them. What does this say about our own value for self and our own self-worth in terms of that the decision to have sex with a celebrity simply because they're a celebrity is the driving factor for me to connect with someone, and to reduce myself to that where there's no real outcome for me that's positive.
But not to make any judgment, but there's a lot of young women in particular that want to do that.
And also, I want to talk about too, okay, so you talk about the young women and the young men. So let's think about it from both perspectives. For the young women, they are watching all of this, and they're watching us, they're watching our reaction, and they're saying, I've got an uncle who looks at me inappropriately, who does this. I've got an older guy in the neighborhood that comes around and that does this. How do they analyze that behavior in their life versus how we are reacting societally? And the young men that we are raising, okay? Oh, that's okay. I'm a man. I can have my way with a woman. I can tell her what to do. That's okay. That is expected of me. Society expects that. We also have to be mindful of that next generation that are coming up. People our age, we are the cake is baked. It's the people below us who are watching everything that we do and watching how we react, and they are thinking about the type of people they're going to be and how they're going to carry on their relationships across gender.
Jason, what about community standards? Because that's always a big issue with legal cases too. But in terms of society, our standards, we've been at our Street Soldiers team, we've done, we've been had outdoor street fairs, we've been at outdoor shows and things, community events, and there'll be like one time we had like a 10-year-old girl dancing like super suggestively. People thought it was cute, they thought it was funny. There were men, there were grown men around that weren't there with their kids. It was out in a park, which of course we made sure that it didn't continue. But it's just like everybody thought that was cute, that was okay. Have we changed as a society in terms of what we think is acceptable of public sexuality?
In the work that I do, it depends. Like I am in touch with where my cases are being heard. Certain communities are more conservatives.
Right.
Other communities are more open-minded. Some communities really trust the police and their word is bond. Whatever they said, it must have happened. Other communities, when the police say something, it's not as clear. There's a trust issue. So for the work that I do, yes, community standards is something that I take into consideration when trying a case, when trying to settle a case. Has it changed? It's hard to say, because for me, a lot of what's happening is not that it's changed. What's changed is our ability to see it. Not that this didn't exist before, because we kind of talked about celebrities marrying young people. That's not a new phenomenon, right? It's just
right.
That
We were talking about Elvis Presley, and Priscilla was 15, 15 or 16,
Right.
But
something
the access to the information, being able to see it in your face. When we were having, there's still issues, but like the black men getting shot and unarmed. Well, you used to just kind of hear about it. Well, now there's actually videos showing black men running away, getting shot in the back.
Oh, and by the way, the officers have gotten away with that too.
We've also been watching this too, because we watched R. Kelly publicly court Aaliyah in front of us.
Right.
And we watched them do an interview where she kikied, God rest her soul, about her age and demurred about her age. We all knew this was going on. We've been talking about this.
But you say we.
So how do you mean as a society? And okay, and he has a point.
We're all co-conspirators.
and
all of us are co-conspirators.
And her caregivers.
her parents.
I can't agree
How
with
are her
that.
parents allowing it?
I'm not a
how
co-conspirator.
how are her parents?
But we have
I'm not here to judge, but where was her parents? I was not involved with
Her
this.
father was very closely involved in her career, and allegedly her mother was.
Were you aware? And Jason, I'm not picking on you. Were you aware of it at the time? Did you support R. Kelly afterwards? Did you go to a concert? Did you buy an album? Did you?
No. Let me answer.
Let me answer.
What
Let me
he's
answer.
saying is,
What about
I'm
that?
not taking the credit as a co-conspirator. I'm
Right,
saying
no
we
doubt.
all have to evaluate ourselves.
All right. I can't say I was a big fan of R. Kelly. My favorite R. Kelly song is Women's Threat, okay? I remember I was a fan of Aaliyah, right? I saw when they had their thing. But my enjoyment of their art form, their music, okay, to me, is not a commentary on how they live their personal lives.
All right, I want to thank our guests for being with us for this episode of Street Soldiers. Attorney Jason Foy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Dr. Lisa English, great to have you on as always. Thank you. And Joel Payne, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. And thank you for joining us for Street Soldiers. I'm Lisa Evers. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. Let's push for peace.